Live with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good resource.
Well, you know. I think if everyone could take their seats, so we're going to get the meeting started again. So good afternoon, and on behalf of the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission, I call this meeting to order. I'd like to thank all of you who are in attendance today. I hope none of the rest of you did what I did and show up at Claiborne as much as we were warned not to. I did, but thank goodness I was running early and was able to get back over here in time. I want to remind you that today's meeting is being live streamed, so be sure to speak into the mics, and I assume these black things with the green circles are on. To begin our meeting, I'll ask Brittany to call roll. Brittany, would you call roll, please?
Yeah. Senator Regina Barrera. Ray Blanca. Mark Vaughn.
Here.
Susanna Boudreaux. Here. Mary Carter.
Here.
Dana Como.
Here.
Dr. Susanna Craig.
Here.
Dr. Cynthia DeCarlo. Rachel Dugas. Representative Kathy Edmondson. Kara Emery.
Here.
Lindsay Fisher.
Here.
Representative Barbara Freiberg.
Here.
Jim Garvey. Melissa Dudo. Here. Dr. James Gray. Angela Grove. Jerry Haristo. Crystal Gillard Mitchell.
Present.
Tessa Holloway. Brooke Huddleston. Mary Beth Hughes. Dejanay Clark Jackson. Misty Perry Lassane. Ruth Lawson. Dr. Timothy Magner.
Present.
Senator Beth Mizell. Caroline Oglesby.
Valerie Legend Proxy.
Farrah Perkins.
Here.
Leanna Price.
Here.
Caitlin Robinson.
Here.
Monique Rose.
Sonia Joseph, proxy.
Ashley Sias.
Here.
Monique Scott Spalding. Dr. Libby Saunier.
Here.
Melissa Stilley. Marcus Thomas.
Yeah.
Michael Tipton.
Here.
Nancy Terrain.
Proxy, Cherie Clark.
Dr. Robert Boyd. Tyree Waikiki. Chenoa Warren. And Rochelle Wilcox.
Proxy Christy Gibbons.
Thank you very much. We have actually more people here than I thought we might have, and that's great. I did run legislation that would say that we would have votes on the majority of folks who are present at the meeting, so we don't have to worry about a quorum of our total membership. But I thought that the larger membership is good because everyone has an opportunity to be at the table, and very diverse organizations have an opportunity to give us input. And I think we're stronger for that, even though everyone can't attend all the meetings. But we appreciate the folks who sent proxies today, and we're happy to have the proxies here. I don't know if all of you got a copy of the minutes in your folder. I didn't get one. But if anybody has any corrections to the minutes, I would take those at this time.
And I can give you a copy of it.
So once you've had an opportunity to look at, she just gave me a copy. Once you've had an opportunity to look at it, you have no corrections. Could I get a motion?
So
Motion
moved.
to approve by Mr. Tipton, second by Ms. Edmonds. Thank you very much. Now we'll get to the heart of the meeting, and I'll pass it on to Karen Powell, who will take it from here. Karen?
Thank you, Representative Freiberg, and thank you everyone for joining us today and finding the new room. Our building is going under some refurbishment, and so our regular room is not available, so thank you for your understanding. So today we want to discuss and receive your feedback on the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission report that is due to be submitted to the legislature and the governor's office at the end of September. As you know, this has been an annual report for several years now, making recommendations to those bodies. And we used to submit this at the start of legislative session. Now we submit it really when people are going into sort of fiscal planning for the year ahead. And so now we submit this report in September. And so you see here in your folders, on the right side of your folders, a drafted report. And so I hope you've had time to look at it, but we'll have time today for you to skim it if you did not get to read it thoroughly. You'll also see that it's comparatively short to prior reports. I think they've been getting a little shorter over time because some of the feedback that I think we have received is that the more direct and the more to the point that we can make this report, the more likely it is to be effective and get read. So that is part of why you see that sort of focus and directness in this report. And then we've also really received feedback over the years that the economic argument is perhaps the one that would be most compelling to legislators. And so you see a real emphasis in this report on the economic argument. So as we dive in today, you'll see that the report acknowledges successes in state funding of the early childhood education systems to date. Some of the things we want to talk about, as we'll go section by section, as we usually do you think there's anything missing from this list in terms of successes that we should be acknowledging in the report? You'll also see that the report pays special attention to the expansion of workforce child care tax credits. So that's something most recent in this most recent legislative session. And so we would really appreciate feedback on whether there's enough explanation in that section to ensure that legislators understand the importance of the credits and how they contribute to the early childhood education system. And then when we get to the recommendations, we want to talk about, do you think the recommendations in this year's report are the right recommendations? Is something missing, or should something be stated in a different? So if everyone is amenable to it, we will start with page 1 and the section entitled The Foundation for Louisiana's Economy. Are there any questions? Are there any suggestions, any other feedback on this opening section of the report?
I have a question. The as of date with nearly 3,500 birth to 3-year-olds on the waiting list, do we know that information? Like what date this data is from?
Yes, that is the footnote, and that is as of July 2020.
Thank you.
I would say that's something that, you know, we can probably for the September report, maybe update that with August data, but we wanted to include the numbers that we had on hand at this time.
Because the second one with the 100,000 that are unserved, that's 24 data. Is that going to reflect the money we lost and the place seats we lost in 25?
The state investment. So yes, it would really reflect that because we had only 78 million for fiscal year 25 that just ended. So October 2024 through the end of the fiscal year, we had the $70 allocation rather than the 87.
Would it make sense to articulate the in some kind of graph or something that says, you know, here's what the number, basically have a numbers graph and a baby's graph so that you can see the the impact of changes in funding on the availability of job. I mean, it seems fairly direct, but if you, maybe if you included it over time, it might demonstrate that that there's a direct correlation there.
Are you thinking, there is a graph on the top of page 2.
Right.
Are you thinking it could be a variation of that or expand on that? Are you thinking looking forward or?
I was thinking, well, I mean, so retrospectively, and you know, it has, what we're seeing is the state's investment is essentially a floor for the availability of seats. And as the state's investment varies, more families are served or put at risk of not being served. And so maybe looking back over time, over the last 3 to 5 years or something like that, you could look at that track and you could see how the state dollars directly impact the availability of seats. I don't know if you want to include the matching funds, but again, we're starting to see a trend. We have data now about state investment and we can see the impact. And if I think it's clear that unless there's an additional investment, those families are going to continue to be underserved. And so it may drive it home in a way.
I think it's good this section is first because with all the new exciting industry need for workers, the workforce needs childcare. And so all of this goes hand in hand. So this economic factor is very, very important, I think, to our state, particularly at this time in the years that are going to be following this with new industry.
So that's good feedback that you feel like it's the proper focus. All right, any other comments on the Foundation for Louisiana's Economy that starts on page 1 and moves over a bit into page 2? Okay, we'll turn next to successful building blocks. That begins on page 2 and carries over to page 3. Questions or feedback on this section?
So I guess my question, and I'm not sure if the chart is supposed to go today, we aspire to serve. But from a quick glance, there doesn't naturally follow. Like I had to read the subtitles and then ponder a little bit what that meant. So as a graphic design to sort of shortcut my thinking, it didn't do that for me. I don't know, we need an arrow, right? Like this is what's today, this is what we aspire to, or something which makes it clear that we're not serving the capacity that's available. But I spent a fair amount of time trying to figure out what the heck this meant. And if I took that much time, I imagine a legislator is probably not going to pause and figure it out. They're just going to flip past it.
Well said. It took me a little while and I'm still not sure I am walking away with what I know the intention is. So I think that just needs to be.
If the chart we were talking about earlier, if you did a gap at the top that says, you know, a number of students had a flat line and you can see what that gap is. That would maybe tell the same story, but show you the change over time.
So more about connecting the graphic that's supposed to be in section 1, but kind of fell over. Yes. Okay.
Also, the commission launched in 2018.
All right, other feedback or questions about successful building blocks? This is a relatively new visual that we added at the top of page 3. Some of you may have first seen it in the recent annual report from 2024 that we presented to the advisory council in May. And it's sort of interesting to see which parishes now have been able to raise funds. what that indicates to us. You know, I'm not sure if that's about, you know, following industry or not. But I think it's an interesting visualization that it essentially cuts diagonally through the state.
I do have a question. Will there be anything else that we're gonna, provide to the legislators as well, or is this the only thing that we're proposing?
This is the proposed report.
Okay, so I will say, I do think that, we should have maybe one document, maybe a one pager that kind of summarizes what this is, right? And then of course it's, just pleasing to the eyes so that of course we can capture their attention.
There will be,
Okay, there will be.
graphic design.
Okay,
This is
okay.
the text that has so far been drafted. So those of you who saw the graphic design last year, it added more color and more imagery of children. And so we're really, the intention so far is that the style will be similar to that of last year,
Mhm.
but with even more color,
Right, okay.
based on, yes, exactly that sort of
Mhm.
comment. Yeah. Not
But I
having
think-
muted colors.
But still just a one,
It's well taken, maybe an executive summary at the beginning on the
Yes.
first page, if you can't do a separate document.
Mhm.
Maybe on the very first page, a first 5 or 6 bulleted statements that really highlight the
Mhm.
top
Me to
5
begin-
things that we really want to highlight out of this
Mhm.
report. And then get into the text of the meat of the document. It's a
Yeah.
really good point, Principal.
And is there any information in this report that's connecting parents not able to go to work? It's not going to businesses, it's not, you know, not by their children not being in childcare, they can't go to work. Like there's any graphic showing that show that we're about getting parents to go to work, but how we're gonna get them to go to work if we don't have childcare
I don't think
for them to go to work?
I don't think we have a graphic per se. I believe it is addressed in the report, but I think an important point would be, you know, how strongly you feel like it's addressed and whether it needs to be communicated in any additional ways. And then I'd be interested in what a visualization might look like, if anyone has ideas of what that might look like.
Businesses closed. Businesses closed, because there's no employees, like big graphic like that.
There's some great graphics on the.
I mean-
On, they have some
Gotta
great
get their
graphics in
attention,
that
yeah,
report
for
that
sure,
showcase
so.
the different rates of absenteeism, people being fired, turning down promotions. There were some really good pictures.
Mhm.
Does it, one of the, since the audience, one of the audiences for this are legislators, is there any concern that showing an increase in local investment? Or is there a need to position the increase in local investment as additive to the state investment rather than, so it's supporting state investment rather than supplanting state investment? And so maybe correlating that with additional seats or expansion. So it's viewed as a partnership rather than, hey, these communities are stepping up so the state doesn't have to. Or we can, you know, we can reallocate those dollars or something. So make sure that there's a reinforcement of this is building on the significant state investment rather than a replacement for the state.
Well, and certainly the local funds raised will not continue to be effective if the state does not continue to add to the matching fund.
I'm thinking less about the matching fund than I am about the general fund dollars. That the matching fund is on top of the general fund dollars, and it's the way locals are contributing to the process rather than, well, if we got 40 million in the matching fund and that gets matched by the localities, that's 80 million. Well, that's the 80 million we're putting into general fund, so we can take that away.
Right.
This needs to be, we're getting to 160, which is serving more children, not we found a way to shift the burden back to the locals away from the state, and then we're serving the same number of kids.
Like that.
Positioning it in a way that advocates for additive rather than encourages supplanting.
So just to kind of piggyback off that a little bit, proud that Avoyles is finally on this map, but I think that it's probably a little misleading because we only have 3 in the entire parish. And the match funding, even though we like banged on doors and tried to get true buy-in from the community, it didn't happen. And it came from a grant from Rep Fees, and one larger business entity, the Paragon Casino and Resort in Avoyelles. So like, even though we banged on doors and tried to get true buy-in, I would be afraid, and I can't speak for all the other parishes, but the true buy-in from businesses isn't really there yet. We just wanted to try to participate as much as we could. So out of all the daycares in Avoyelles, we were only able to get 3 seats, which is not a game.
Any other thoughts, like, are there thoughts on how we might want to introduce Melissa's point?
So I don't know if we want to call out, parish by parish, just to put it more in perspective that like the businesses in Avoyelles, I'm just using that as an example, aren't like all buying into this, but maybe we call out how many seats each of those parish have received, but then a further call out of, I guess then it gets busy. So a graphic designer would have better ideas than me, but then maybe saying by grant and how many businesses bought into the idea.
Well, I think too, the delineation between if it's philanthropy that helped generate those local dollars, was it parish city council, was it a millage? Because that makes a difference.
That makes a big difference.
Because if we think about Caddo,
Right.
what really initiated that was philanthropy, and then it was philanthropy, that's not sustainable.
Mhm.
And so how do you think about a sustainable revenue source? And I know people get itchy about that, but like, that's part of the conversation at the end of the day. And so like, I know in Lafayette Parish and some other parishes right now, they're trying to just get philanthropy in the door. So then they can work with parish city government to see what they can generate in revenue.
Well, I think what Dr. Magner said in terms of that graph, the number of unserved children, I'm almost seeing it color coded in that sense,
Yeah.
right? Because we have the total number of kids, maybe it's all, I don't know what color, yellow if they're unserved, and then like Libby said, red for philanthropy or green for CK. I don't
know if it's
Not
that or
outside.
if it's like we have served and then like one color and then the number of children served through the fund.
yeah.
And then you have unserved. And then you could say that somewhere in writing that this local generation of funds are a combination of philanthropic business and local government funds or
Yeah,
something.
'cause I mean, even in Caddo where we've raised
A
$2
lot of
million or something, it's 200 kids.
Yeah.
I mean, over the last couple of years. So, I mean, the scale of the need is huge.
But I do like this visual for legislators because it says, all of these people are doing something. All of these people in all of these parishes have tried to do something, even if it was knocking on doors and only getting 3 businesses to come forward. At least they did.
Yeah.
And look at all these folks that haven't.
Mhm.
So I'm in this parish, I'm concerned.
I do have a question for the department. On our website, we have a data dashboard related strictly to the fund over time. And it has like, the amount, it's all the data that y'all have, but I wonder if we could link that data dashboard page in the report. So like if a legislator felt like clicking on it, he or she could click on it and see over time where the investment was. They'd also see the breakdown per revenue source. Like Harrah's, now Caesars, just started generating this past fiscal year. And they've been a revenue source since 2019.
So if you wanted to use this map, because I think the growth over time is helpful, but to your point, the impact. And so maybe you have red, yellow, green, or whatever for the 3 colors, but then you have a 3 different saturations. So it's less than 20 kids and 20 to 50 kids. So if you're a dark green, it means you got money in 2024 and you have a lot of kids. If you're a light red, it means you got money in 2026 and you're less than 25 kids or something. So it uses a single graph, but it tells two stories. It tells a story of growth of the funding, but it also tells about, and in theory, you would see that the earlier you got the money, the more kids you are serving, and that's the trajectory you'd want to see. So it gives you a way to help mitigate the idea that you're serving hundreds of kids with your 5 people.
Thank you. I've made a note. And we're very fortunate to have very good graphic designers to work with on this. So as several of you have said, we're not all graphic designers, but we will give them concepts as well as some helpful ideas about how you can still put it in the one graph and see what they can. Other comments on successful building blocks on pages 2 and 3? Okay, thank you. Great feedback so far. Yes.
I'm just curious if maybe you may have an opinion on this. Is it helpful to place this in the context of other states? So Louisiana is following the lead of other states, leading other states, or right on pace or something, so that it's an idea that this isn't, there's a broader conversation that we're part of. And so as we're talking about, it's also potentially a competitive argument, right? If there are other states that, Louisiana's getting on the bus, or Louisiana's driving the bus, or whatever, does that help with the economic argument that it's making a difference from a competitive standpoint, or it isn't?
I mean, the place that we continually hear is that Louisiana is helping to lead the charge, particularly in the South, and then we're in the top 20 in accountability for the country. And we were one of the first states to unify our early childhood education system. And while other states have made like their own agency, I think we all know there's not an appetite for us to do that, but the unification within the Department of Education has been a real strength, and the ability for the department to not just be accountable for the programmatic stuff, but for the finance pieces too. And there's been a lot of work in the governance space. The other thing that it makes us unique is our early childhood education fund. We get a lot of praise for that and how we track it as a state too. So, but there's a lot we're doing right. We just have so many kids we need to serve.
And so is that a helpful framework to say we're leading in policy, we're leading in these things,
I
but
think
in terms of investment?
What do you think, Barbara?
I think everyone's struggling and everyone has their little pocket of what they're really doing well. I'm just not sure we're gonna be able to find the data that would support that. Okay.
Well, I think it's interesting from going to meetings with the other states. You'll be in so many meetings and you'll feel envy. Wish we had that.
Right.
And then you go to another meeting the next hour and you're the one that has more than the other state. So I mean, we are leading in some areas, but there's so many states that are.
Our team will be part of a meeting in September that will give us a good sense of what's going on, particularly around the South.
I just didn't know from where we are on the funding model,
Right.
and if we're leading on policy and lagging on funding, is that a driver?
I think it's a double-edged sword, because they're like, well, who else is doing this well? And if you say, well, that's not Louisiana. Okay, so if you say Louisiana's doing well, but who else is doing it?
There are some states that have put billions of dollars.
Right.
So, I mean,
But then some states are also primarily funding. They may be putting more funding into early childhood, but it's primarily 4-year-olds and they're ignoring birth to 3. So it's a little difficult, I think, sometimes to know how to compare numbers.
I think that's right, particularly with when they talk, if we say 10 years ago, if we said early childhood in the state, people would only think about pre-K-4. And so now, like collectively, we see we're really talking about birth through 3-year-olds as well, because we serve over 85% of our 4-year-olds that are at risk and less than 30% of our birth to 3-year-olds. Like that's a different conversation. And so, you know, when we have these, I would just assume y'all too, like these conversations with our other state partners, they're just like, oh, well, we figured out 4-year-olds 3 years ago. Yeah, we did that about 20 years ago. So,
Right, but they're not, a lot of states are not doing what we're doing with birth to 3. So I think we really are very ahead with birth to 3, but then of course we're still struggling, even though I agree, the difference between 10 years ago and now, we're still struggling with folks who don't understand what that birth to 3 is.
agree, but we did just close a legislative session where we didn't hear the words babysitting for the first time. That was
Too loud.
exciting.
Not too much.
Not too
Take the win.
And there did not seem to be as much discussion about whether that funding as other sessions.
I think it's a testament to the governor putting in his executive budget and then just holding the line. And then the chair of appropriations, like, if I see the letters EC, I know to leave it alone. Like, okay.
Thanks to all of you.
Yeah, thanks to
And-
everybody.
And I was in a meeting, I just happened to be speaker yesterday, and we talked about early childhood, of course. And he said, yeah, I maybe hate to tell you this, but I think maybe those scores, our education scores coming up, maybe it has something to do with early childhood. Absolutely.
That's huge.
No, I thought that was huge. I mean, so it's not just babysitting, because he.
May not know the words, but they're humming the tune.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's almost a paradigm shift.
Yeah, I mean,
That is quite a
I
paradigm.
thought it was
Almost a
I thought it was
miracle, Jim.
very, very good. I said, but you're going to continue to hear from me on it too.
You know.
Anyways.
All right, shall we move to innovative approaches for growth? So this is, you know, a newer section. This is obviously not something we've had in the report before because, well, the credits existed, but not in this form. And so it was a much smaller credit before. It is not something that's been highly utilized in the state previously. And so it's really drawing attention to the new legislation and the new opportunity.
I have a question for this part. Is there a business in particular here? The Representative Freiberg's point earlier, everyone loves to see their own district. I almost wonder if there's either a business or parishes that we should celebrate here.
It's just had such low uptake over
Oh,
the years. So the thought too was around if we could increase the tax credit
Yeah.
and you get half of that back depending on quality, that it might be the way for Louisiana to have a cost sharing model between business, family, and the public portion being the tax credit.
What would be very exciting would be if that's the celebration we can add in a future report
Yeah.
to
that
see
would
an
be cool.
uptick. Yeah.
Or even if it's, I mean, but if it's a picture of one employer kissing one baby there.
It'll be graph.
There are some good plans for graphics.
Yeah.
It's a little difficult though, you know, how do you show it's an employer? But
I mean, I'm just trying to think, like, is there a business where businesses might appreciate, you know, being celebrated for being innovative and working for families?
I wonder, in New Orleans, the Windsor Court partnered with Early Partners, if that might be something to get.
and why, yeah, a call out box or something and some pictures about why that was
Yeah,
so
that's
important.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say one of the visuals that is, you know, possible, that's in the possible contention is a parent basically working with an infant on their lap, because that is a consequence if you don't have reliable childcare. And it's kind of hard to concentrate on what you're doing while you're holding an infant on your lap. Other thoughts for innovative approaches for growth? And do we feel like, you know, the information here is clear, or are there any kinds of clarification we might add? You also see in this section, you know, a call out recognizing the importance of a strong and stable workforce.
again, this is just a wordsmithing question as you think about your colleague, is in the box where it says state invests, would state reimbursement and be not only clear, but potentially make it feel like a reimbursement to the, rather than an investment? I don't know if that creates, if state investment is a red flag, or if it was just state reimburses via tax credit. So it's focused on the business, helps to maybe, I don't know, not really obscure, but keep the conversation focused on the business and reimbursement. So it's all in the same kind of line of reasoning or something. I don't know. I'm just maybe too granular, but.
So in that call box the box at the top of page 4.
Yes. So it'd be small business invests, state reimburses, large company invests, state reimburses. Again, unless what we're trying to do is set up a state investment kind of dynamic, in which case the word matters. I don't know.
I was wondering this.
I like invest.
Okay. I mean,
Because,
you're the boss.
because it doesn't really throw in your face for giving them money back.
Okay.
And there are a lot of people in the legislature who think we need to get rid of all tax credits. So,
And that
to
was my
say
question.
reimburse just makes it, I know what you're saying, but I like business invest, the state invest, the family
Invest.
pays or invest.
Okay, yeah.
Everyone has skin in the game.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Family invest.
Yeah.
That's true.
So I mean, if everybody's investing, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, and it also subliminally refers to dividends and returns.
All good.
It seems more positive to me.
That's great.
Than reimburse.
Okay.
But I do think this is the kind of discussion we want to have, because, when you have such a tight, concise report, first of all, I believe every word matters all the time, but
Yeah.
especially when it's so tight and concise, it's especially
So the
important.
families invest in
Yeah.
but that invest to me is more positive. We're putting it in because we know something, or we hope something
Right.
is going to come of what we're investing.
I think being consistent with that language
Yeah.
among all three parties then makes it
Right.
a common investment model.
Is it also flexible spending where you can reserve your money and your salary? We have that option in our, and the help pay for a child. If you choose so, like, I wonder if it's an institution. That is okay.
Yeah, I don't think we know much about what districts might be employing ours. I don't know if we'd have enough information to share this time, but that could be really interesting to start digging into over the next year and get more information about
I
across
think
the
too,
state.
with the new federal pieces that are there too around investments in childcare.
I mean, and it might be something to do at a future meeting.
Yeah, I think
have
that
some
would be
discussion
good.
about this, bring some speakers in. Thank you for your patience as I take notes. Yes, exactly. Marcus, yeah.
I think workforce becomes a real strong topic in the future, because we have businesses have invested over $50 billion in Louisiana over the last year and a half. And I think we've created over, I think, something like 70,000 more jobs coming forward. So the argument of early childhood becomes even more important to the legislature, because like if you have projects of such in your district, if you don't have quality early childcare and can't fill those seats, it'll be hard to fill those jobs that we brought to Louisiana. So we may want to include those statistics of these big projects that's coming to Louisiana and all these jobs that's about to open up, the importance of having quality childcare and funding seats and getting a lot of these.
I would go back in that first section.
Yeah, when I saw workforce,
No, I'm
Not-
glad you circled back on that, Marcus, because when Representative Freiberg made the comment, of course, I nodded and thought, yes, exactly. But actually inputting the statistics could be a real powerful reminder of the shift that's coming and the growth that's coming and the need to meet it and respond to it.
And we have a lot of qualified parents at home for these jobs that won't be able to, fill out applications, don't have qualified jobs.
Thank you, taking notes on everything, taking notes on that to go back in section 1. All right. If there are no further comments on pages 3 through 5 about innovative approaches for work, and as you know, of course we can do that. But we'll turn to page 5 and 6 with the recommendation. And are these the right recommendations? Is something missing? Should something be stated differently? You'll recognize that these are recommendations that have been made before. But you also see that the workforce childcare tax credit is specifically called out.
Is 30 million in the early childhood education fund enough?
At the moment, it's enough to match, but of course, systems are actually fundraising right now, and we all hope they have great success, so it might not be enough for next year.
Because the revenue that's generated right now from the different sources is about, what, 14 or 15 million annually?
20, yes.
And we should get up to at least 20 million related to the sports betting, because they've, they all raised the tax credit, but we just don't generate.
It's going to be tight.
We have 40 million on page 2 and 30 million on page 5.
Okay. Well, the 40 million was a investment.
A
That
one-time.
was one-time investment.
Okay, so recommendation was an additional 30?
Well, we spent, that 40 million was spent down.
Okay, so again, I just want to make sure that if it's additional or an annual investment or something like that.
And Michael, when we, in the task force, we talked about codifying language around whatever money is needed. If there's not enough money in the fund, that the state would then make a match, right?
Yeah, I think the concept was effectively the locals are fundraising on the expectation that it will be matched, and the state is effectively obligated to match it. They promise to. The question is how it's dedicated. I'm sure somebody could wordsmith whether you sort of frame that as an automatic appropriation to match it or setting up a fund that you draw down on. I don't know the most. I think this would cover us for a year or two, certainly. But will we run out of it? If locals are doing what they ought to do, yes, that would be insufficient. Yeah.
I guess since we're saying these are things we have to do, if you're reading it closely, it looks like, well, we've done number 1 because we had 40 million, done number 2 because we have the workforce tax credits. So
A note that we might need to add to that earlier section, something about how we have exhausted those funds and now the annual projected.
Yeah, and I
explain.
think it'd be important to somehow talk about like the new fiscal year,
right.
that if we don't get that 30 million, we will run out. Like, we're not going to be able to match.
Or ensure the annual match or something like that, regardless of whether it's 30 or 50.
Whatever it is.
Right, and maybe there's a way to frame that about this is an annual state obligation that we've agreed to.
Yes.
Additional fundraising is going on, so we want to make sure that the state makes the locals whole or something like that for their efforts. Or something along that.
other thoughts or verbiage suggestions about the recommendation? I agree with Michael, you know, we tried to indicate that idea by saying codify the match in the law, but is that the most effective way to say it, or might there be a way to?
Is the encouragement of employers to invest in the second bullet there? Is the goal of that to reduce cost burden for states and families, or is it to expand the access to childcare by, enabling a broader cost sharing model or something? Because again, if it's seen as, again, to my earlier point,
Yeah.
if the 40 million in the match fund is matched by the localities, that's 80 million. Well, we're reducing the state because the state doesn't have to put 87 into the general fund. Whereas if this is a way to expand the state's investment through a partnership with families and businesses, then it's increasing access rather than reducing costs. Because ideally, we want the number to stay the same. We just want it to be able to serve more kids by bringing in families and businesses as investment partners.
And so, and two, for like, if you think about the workforce childcare tax credit, those are for families that they're not receiving a subsidy. You know, it's for those families, maybe they're on the wait list. They're our ALICE population too, that are in the workforce.
I just think that it's not to reduce the state's outlay.
Right.
Not to make it cheaper, it's to make more seats available or to help with the burden.
Sort of adding that reminder and a few key points.
Right, I would strictly know reducing the cost burden for the state and the families. I was about to mention his earlier point when I was reading this as well. I believe it should say that the purpose is to expand the access for children and families. Because like he said, it does look like we're giving the state an out of, continuing to contribute.
So both maybe striking that language and adding some additional
Yes.
language reminding of the ultimate goal to expand access.
And then in the second bullet, as new innovative ideas emerge, what about substituting opportunities for ideas? Are we talking about new ideas for tax? Or are we talking about new ideas? What is ideas? I don't know. Does it mean as our state increases our industry, are we going to be able to embrace that? Or does it mean new ideas for funding?
I think that's a great question. I think as written, it was probably thinking of new ideas for funding and funding
okay.
models, but it doesn't have to.
No, that's fine then. Okay.
And do we want to add any clarifying language?
No, that's fine.
You want to say models and partnerships then?
That's good. I like
Like
that.
Innovative models and partnerships.
That's great. Yeah, I like that.
Be a lot of things though.
Right. Anything else on the recommendations or that closing that follows the recommendations?
It's really minor, Karen, but, and I don't know if it matters. But when I read 1, 2, and 3, in my mind, I immediately think of rank.
Yes.
And sometimes I don't even get to 3. And in this case, my opinion, I think 3 is probably number 1. Number 2 would be the 30 million investment. And number 3 would be tax incentives. I still think like it's kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. So like they're going to codify it, but they're going to take the money from our ask most likely as they're just shifting funds around. So I think the additional investment of 95 million should just always be first.
I don't think that's minor at all.
Okay.
The idea of
No,
ranking.
I
Thank
like
you.
that. That's
Yeah.
good.
So to her point as well, does it make sense to just have 3 bullets and not put 1, 2, and 3? So you just have 3 recommendations, so there is a unit and there's only 3. It's not like we're getting to 17.
Right. Do you all agree or have further feedback or thoughts about the order? Melissa suggesting they be reordered in, putting the 95 first. Then I believe you said the 30 million and then the workforce childcare tax credits.
We've done 1 and 2.
Mhm.
And so the question is the sticker shock of number 3, you want to bury the lead or do you want to lead with that?
I think they're so used to our sticker shock that they're just numb to it at this point and they expect it.
Okay.
That would just be my
Fair.
opinion.
Okay.
They do
Well, it's
know
the
we
most
understand.
important thing.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments and really the ending? Anything about the ending that we need to add, reword?
Again, the line at the bottom there, while investments to the state are vital, the issue is too large for the state alone to address. Does it make sense to say, collaboration with businesses and families can increase the ability, again, rather than imply that this is getting too expensive for the state to deal with, because we've just asked for $1 billion. So maybe if we say we all work together, we can make this a reality rather than saying it's getting too expensive.
I was just curious, is the goal to make every parish whole when they come up with a match? Because if you have one parish that's raising $20 million and you're only asking for 30, and what if other parishes come on and one other parish raises $10 million? So
No, that's a problem that we are very aware of and that I'm trying not to think too deeply about yet so I can sleep. But there's so many things in this job that keep us from doing it. But no, I think that is the goal, that we don't want to have to make those difficult choices and decide how to reduce allocations so that every parish gets funded. I think what would probably, I mean, I'm speaking a little prematurely, but I think what would be non-negotiable for me is, and I don't think people would disagree, every parish that raises needs to get funds. It shouldn't be, oh, you put yours in first, so. But then that means if we don't have enough in the early childhood education fund to 100% match, we're going to have to reduce allocation.
And then how do you make those decisions?
Exactly.
I was wondering, like, should there be a system where there's a cap, like you're gonna get a minimum of, almost like you can do a budget because no matter what, you're gonna get at least this, and then
Okay,
if
that's
more
fine.
money's raised, then you'll get, which will be great. It's Christmas, you get another, 10 million or whatever.
No, exactly. Those are considerations, because also, speaking to Melissa's point, if you don't have enough money and you only have 3 seats, I mean, are we gonna then cut that by 50% because there's not enough money to match it? Then you're
Right.
really getting almost nothing out of it. So I think there are lots of kind of if-thens and rules and categories that would need to be built in. But what would be best is not to have to be in that situation
Right.
at all. So
Right.
we ask you to educate.
I mean, I'll say here what I said at a task force meeting somewhere, but I mean, effectively, if I'm local community and I'm fundraising, I've been promised a dollar for dollar match. It's in writing, it was part of the conversation. That's what's expected. The money's not there, but the state has said they're going to do it. I think a reasonable lawyer somewhere can figure out how to get this money out of the state, right? And so, whether it's on a compensated basis, et cetera, if the state's not going to put it up, it's been promised. You said it. So now it's just a question of how the state's going to do it, the hard way or the easy way. And so I'm hoping the legislature does it the right way, but if not, somebody ought to, if I'm a local that it was promised this, find my local lawyer in town who wants to do this on a pro bono basis. We'll give you a percentage of what you get out of it. Go to town. Take some swings. Yeah,
I mean, if it's a millage, it's one thing, but if it's philanthropy.
absolutely. I mean, you're just effectively being lied to as a local government. And I'd be downright pissed. So, and they ought to be. I know you can't say that as state government employees, but
Different conversation for different day, but I do think at some point we have to talk about what that limit is going to be, because as it grows and grows, kind of like I said earlier, we're just going to pull from the other money that parishes that aren't able to do this in big towns, and so we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. So I do think at some point we have to have discussions of possibly what that path looks like, so that we're not having false advertisement of this one-to-one match. I don't think it should be unlimited, but that's just.
I do think, yeah, it is a very difficult decision to make. I do think what I have seen of advocates during session is that those of you in this room have done a very good job of making that point and saying, look, you can't sacrifice this one funding stream for this. You can't leave it out, and have really educated about the consequences of going just in one direction with funding. So I do think it's important to continue, but it's a difficult thing to explain. Y'all have done it well. So Michael, I just wanted to let this group know, at least in terms of processes, to try to make sure that it's known to the legislature and the governor ahead of time how much is being raised in localities. We do set some preliminary deadlines in the fall where we say, okay, what's your tentative number? And then we have an additional opportunity for networks to tell us an updated number if they've done additional fundraising in between those interim months, so that it at least is knowledge that's available as people are deciding budgets, to give them the opportunity to make sure they fully include what's been matched locally. So not saying that's sufficient, but just letting you know that we do at least follow that process to make
And
sure
how much
that.
money is in the fund right now?
I have to look. I did not.
As of August 4th, about a little over 35 million.
In the match?
Oh, well, no, that's currently in the fund.
Okay, okay.
In the second to last paragraph on page 6, we talk about the impact on today's workforce. Is there any value in adding something about, and, participation in early childhood has demonstrated that children are better prepared for kindergarten, et cetera, helping ensure Louisiana has a workforce, for generations to come. So we get today's workforce and tomorrow's workforce. Does that resonate?
Yeah, I think that there was some talk about making sure it had an economic focus primarily, but I don't think that means it can be completely excluded. It is
Well,
a
that's
real
still
argument that
economic.
it is still an economic argument. Yes. So I think that's a nice way to bring in the other implications of it.
So we're investing in the parents, but we're also investing in the kids.
This might be minor, but I think it's a potential for it to be overlooked. Libby mentioned that the commission launched in 2018. And in the first paragraph on page 6, it says over the past 6 years, are we speaking of since the commission had launched? We would need to change that to 7 years.
For the
Just a
the first state investment was in 2019.
It was in 20, what?
The first state investment.
So
was
you're,
in
this is
2019.
in reference to 2019 and not 2018 when it launched. Okay, so it's correct.
But I think, yes.
It's a good
Fortunately, the
clarifier.
commission report led to
Okay.
some beginning investment.
A good
So, yeah.
clarifier.
And I think it's very simple to add, since the first state
Right,
investment.
okay.
Clarify that.
In that last paragraph, we're talking about the match program, we're talking about tax incentives, but then we kind of jump to MJ Foster promise, and are those legislators going to know what that is?
Yes.
They will.
Yes, they will.
Okay. Just, because we kind of like.
They
jumped to
will,
this thing.
and that is, I love that paragraph.
Okay.
It's very important. Yeah.
Just as long as.
Oh, no. Yeah.
What's that?
how they can access.
All right, I really appreciate this robust discussion. You can see that I made many detailed notes, and so we will take this back to the report writers. Any further comments raised today? And gives you a very strong hold to go forward. All right. We'll now move on with our agenda.
Oh. At this point, I do need a motion to endorse the September 2025 Early Childhood Care and Education Commission report draft, allowing staff to make any minor technical changes prior to the report submission as needed.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Libby Sonye, seconded by Marcus Thompson.
And we'll get a copy once it's been.
Yes, absolutely. Once it's been designed, once these good notes and feedback are integrated, you will receive a copy going forward. Thank you very, very much.
And now we're going to hear from Dr. Barnes and his team. I'm excited to look at what has happened with this teacher pays pilot that we've had. So turn it over to you, Dr. Barnes.
All right, well, we're gonna have some show and tell up here on the screen. Got a full set of printed books.
Yes.
I'm just gonna offer a brief introduction to the project and my team and hand it over. But I think this is, we're at the tail end of a year-long effort for the Department of Education. There was an opportunity with some one-time money to offer additional support for child care centers, specifically related to those targeted for today. Given where we were back in 2, we ended up starting this grant program. We brought in applications, ended up with a little over 600 centers applying for these grants that would allow them to get their teachers supplemental stipends for the previous 2 years. With the roughly $20 million of funding that was made available for the grant program, we ended up with only enough funding. 400 centers randomized. We got that now. Say yes, for a couple of years, there were a lot of centers throughout the state that got support that served a role in stabilize the market, teachers support. But we can also look back now and learn a little bit more about attention. So there were I'm gonna hand it over and let a little bit more detail about the design of the program and some of the analysis done and data we're sharing. But I would still characterize the preliminary results as quite early. I've got a few more things I'd like to look at that'll potentially hear soon about the final that are out. I'm gonna hand it over to Gordon Thibodeau, our Associate Director of Research at Eric Mills. Follow-up colleague.
So I'm going to talk to you today about the CCAD teacher file. So just a little bit of background. So you see the mention this came through some relief funds and an opportunity to disperse those funds to early learning centers across the state. So we recognize the ability to use this as an opportunity to study the impact of our child centers, their attention. So we helped to facilitate this pilot, which included a lot of research design next areas. But the major goals of this pilot are to look at the impact of teacher raise incentive on the childcare economy in Louisiana, as well as we know this is a national policy issue. So pilot, a randomized pilot like this. So those that were involved in the centers, so kind of be repetitive at some point, but Type 3 Early Learning Center, CCAP certified, and full-time teacher. Next slide. When we got into this question, we had to do a little bit of digging around for reference points on what turnover looked like within the childcare settings. We know that many states report on those statistics, but they vary widely. It hovers nationally around just a 40%, 30 to 40%. But Louisiana has some unique data from some prior analyses that have been put by some researchers out of the University of Virginia. So they've done a lot of looking at teachers leaving over time and have found that the level at which a 1-year turnover rate is about 46%. If you extend that out to 2 years, it's somewhere between 50 and 60%. So it does, there is a range, but we're looking at a magnitude about that much. So as I mentioned before, there's some prior work to this. We're kind of digging through to see what has been done before. We'll be the first to think of this kind of pilot idea. It turns out that there's some other work being done and has been done in other states. First one was in Virginia, a small pilot of teachers within Fairfax County, Virginia, I think that is, where they actually dispersed a certain amount of incentives to trial, followed retention. There was a larger statewide initiative in North Carolina called the UNC Wages Study, which was kind of a teacher benefit and professional development program that also offers stipends, a real collective kind of program, and holistic kind of change. And that found some really remarkable results. But there are very few instances other than there are no instances actually like that, other than the Fairfax study of this kind of study, the application of incentive, our child. So last point I want to make is that we were since we were thinking about this, we had to run kind of some statistical analyses like researchers typically do with the data to try to find an area of retention or turnover that would be needed. So that last bullet point kind of reflects where we were looking for the data change. Next slide. So a little bit about what we did to collect the information. First, we had childcare center directors apply to receive those funds, filling out an eligibility form for the grant money. And we selected those centers, over 500 of those centers. There were more than applied. We had about 500 that were selected study at this time. So we took a third of them and equitably distributed kind of a sorting process to 3 different groups. The first group is a group which received a set fixed amount for their teachers increase, around $2,000. The second third of those centers, this sample, over 500, received a 10% proportion in the hourly wages. And then a third group, also in the whole group, was not assigned to a wage increase. So they were there for comparison. What happened to those teachers that did not receive this kind of stuff? So we held surveys up until August 2022. And then from that point, very first quarter, we started measuring. So this is, in the research world, this is known as a randomized control trial. So it's kind of talked about in a lot of different settings. We think about it as kind of the gold standard because you're trying to rule out a lot of factors and those driving the association between retention and other variables, right? So random assignment allows you to kind of minimize the voice, basically. And it's an equitable way of looking at assignment study. Often very challenging. So that those that were selected into the study, they received an A increase, and served as a comparison group, as centers. You'll see more about this as Eric kind of present results. And then overall, we took about 8 surveys over a 2-year period to measure retention. And essentially what that looked like was each of the centers would get a survey of the teachers that they had listed from the beginning of the study. So when they applied, they actually listed out all their teachers on the hours working, what was their level of pay. And then we reintroduced that survey with those same teachers. And they had, the centers had to go through and check more still there, left, have they been replaced, what were those teachers making? We finally did some collection and follow-up for quality control, because as you might imagine, people are trying to fill out surveys according to instruction. There's gonna be some little errors and biases that happen. I say little, sometimes it can be quite significant, so you have to make whichever quality control we call the centers to verify work in the study from beginning to end, and then also what their pay level. So I believe that brings me to the results. That's just an example of the survey itself. We did it platform and kind of trying. So centers, surveys and data came back to us for analysis. And I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who has been working with the data and will present the results. All right, great. Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, so I was part of the team that kind of crunched the numbers on this and did statistical analysis. My apologies, the New Orleans Pelicans basketball organization, but this one important. Next slide, please. Okay, so 533 centers in the study. We started with a little more, but through various dropouts, opt-outs, we went down to 2,533, and then over 7,000 each study. And then the 2-year turnover rate for the centers participating in this pilot was 46.8%. So a little lower than the BASIC study that Jordan referenced earlier, and average.
So that was going into the study?
This was going in, so this was the end of the study. For that 2-year period, we looked at we ended up with a 46.
The 60.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a map of Louisiana and center locations. We grouped it by the bonus treatment groups, control group. And as you can see, we have a pretty good spread here. Obviously, it's more urban skewed. So New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Lake Charles, Monroe, and Shreveport is kind of in the center. So we also have quite a bit of rural areas as well with early education. And just have a look at that. This is the kind of density. As you can see, more definitely took up the bulk of the centers. All right, and this is the number of teachers per center. So red line here represents kind of the model number, which is most centers that we were in our study had 16. And then this gray shaded area is kind of the quartile range for nerds, and that is about 5 to 11. Okay. Sorry, Eric. No worries. Feel free to ask any questions. Okay, this is just another look at this 2-year pilot and the overall data, the overall trends that we're looking at for all centers. So again, we end up with that about 47% turnover rate, and then these blue bars here on the bottom show for every 3-month period the turnover rate. And interestingly enough, for year 1, at the 12-month mark, we're seeing a very high turnover rate at 17%, and the rest are a little more, but the average 10% per quarter.
This is 3 months of the study, not 3 months of people employed.
So from the study starts, let's say like month 0, right? So from 0 to 3, we survey those teachers.
And within those 3 months, that period, we see a 11.3%.
I might just quickly add that that corresponds somewhat with what we think of as kind of an academic year. So program started in August. And so if we think about that 12-month window, that might have been a large group of teachers who could finish the year and do fall semester was taken off.
Okay, and this is just the wage distribution. This is actually really interesting and important. Most teachers make about $10. Okay, when you go online, Google how much do early education teachers make, you get usually around the average 12, 13, and that's definitely skewed by very high earning teachers, and those are typically directors that also have teachers. So you have some directors making $30, $35 an hour. But the bulk of teachers coming in make about $8, $9, $10 an hour. Another interesting thing about this, if you go to gross annual wage, you're looking at about $30,000. Most teachers make less than that. Okay, and that's $30,000 and less is asset limited in Louisiana. So that's really paycheck. Paycheck, that is a bad accident play. That's quite next. Okay, so this is the job market in which people out of high school, people just out of college, right? For a single person. Something that's really important to think about.
So do you have demographic crosstabs on this?
What kind of
Age of the teacher. I know you have education, but I didn't see age of the teacher in there.
Yeah, we did not quite have information.
Yeah, well, one of the challenges in data collection here is our points of contact with center level rather than directly engaging with all of the teachers. And that, while we would always try to be a little more ambitious and get a lot of information, I think at a practical level, that really did limit how much detail we could capture. I may say a few words at the end of the presentation about some ideas for some work. So there may be opportunities to come back with other creative data and impacting questions, but
Well, I guess.
for now, we won't.
That brings up a question I have. And when in our report, we said in Louisiana that the teachers make less than $15 an hour. I thought 15 was a pretty high figure because I hear more like 9 and 10. And you have the average is 12. So is 15 too high there? I don't know. Just a question.
There's different figures.
I just thought 15 was high. It made it sound like, that was the average.
I would agree. Is definitely in the real world on the higher end.
I thought it was very high.
Leanne, would you agree?
And it's really gonna depend on the demographical area. Of
Oh,
the
I know,
actual
but
center and-
that makes it sound like
Yeah.
that's kind of the average.
Yeah, I would agree too, because I would agree that it would take a minute to get a lead teacher to 15. They wouldn't start out unless they were just all,
Can we use this as the average and
But-
less than 12?
I think it depends on where you are.
Yeah.
I know
But
it
for the whole
depends on
state,
where you are, but we could just talk about an
Say
average. They
12.
make an average.
Divide
Say
it 12.
12.
12 would be,
Yeah.
I think that would be fine.
Because I think 15, one of our issues is the salary. So to suggest it's 15, even if it,
It's certainly not.
no, I think it's,
And this is over 7,000 teachers. Over 7,000. So I think it's pretty difficult at what the real situation. Final point I'd like to make is the average starting salary for a customer service is. Okay, so again.
Yeah.
Most people
We're way
are at minimum wage, 8, 9, 10. Very hard work, very stressful work. Compare that with, doing some customer service work, and, what are you going to choose? But who are we attracting? Particular profession.
And was there that much difference between getting the 2,080 a year versus a 10%? Because 10% on, let's say $20,000 a year for teachers making that is about $2,000. So did you see the difference? Any differences?
Well, I don't want to say much because I want to let
Okay.
James. We're going to have some slides to show you the groups. I do want to emphasize that though that we structured this with a few things in mind. we were looking at this Virginia study, their early findings suggested that something like a dollar an hour has significant and sizable effects on reducing turnover. So that was kind of a benchmark we started with, but by structuring it this way, we thought we would have a little more variability across the state so that we could see an $8 an hour employee who got that 2080 bonus. You know, that's more like a full dollar an hour, or on the other side, maybe a $15 an hour teacher who got 10% bonus. And so that's part of the design, to see if that would help us be able to identify a wider range of patterns across the different size stipends. What does that amount of money mean for a teacher rates of pay? But we'll see in a minute what that gave us.
Okay, and right, before we get into the actual work groups, we're just looking at the total number of teachers. This is a statistical model called the regression, and basically what it's showing us that as pay increases, predictably turnover rate goes down. So we could take this model and say between $15, maybe about $16 right there. If we get every teacher to about $60 an hour, we're looking at a 25% turnover rate. But this is just a kind of predictive analysis. There's a lot more that goes into that, and that's not something grain of salt, right? All right, now we're getting into our groups. Flipping back to just the overall trend. The yellow is control. So these teachers did not receive supplemental pay. The blue is the 2080, I believe, so $1 extra an hour, and then the green is 10% bump. They're very similar. So really not much of a change there. When we get to the end, we actually see that the $1 an hour group is a little higher in turnover rate, control, and 10%.
And there's no statistical significance between those.
Oh, there's not. All right, splitting up different ways. Just wanted to kind of take a look at the maybe different pay bins. We have minimum wage for 10, 10, 15, 15, 20, and 20 plus. And again, kind of predictably, as pay goes up, the trends drop below this 50% turnover. But the groups stay very tight together, right? So structurally, pay goes, or turnover goes down as pay goes up. But between these award groups, we're seeing that really we're not seeing too much. All right, and this is again another logistic regression with the prediction as pay increases, where can we predict turnover will be? And with these groups, we can see that the 10% group and the control group are very tightly aligned. Okay, so there's really not much of a difference here. The plus $1 an hour, we see it drops more drastically than the other two. But again, when we look at the numbers, none of these are statistically.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and then this is just to look at that again, statistically defines what we're looking at over here is the significance. Anything highlighted in yellow says that it's statistically significant. In those two groups, 10% and the $1 an hour compared to control, we're not seeing that highlighted. That's not. However, when we look at average pay for teachers, the performance score of centers, the poverty rate in which the center is located, and the percentage of teachers without a degree, all of those are and predictors of turnover. So we can kind of look at this a little more. What this is indicating, I think, is much more holistic. It's not just one, right? Just $1 an hour, 10% bump. That isn't enough, right? It's these other education and performance. So we'll get into that.
So are you saying that the average pay per teacher, irrespective of whether they got, so if the center was paying, overall was paying teachers more, they're more likely to stay. If overall it was a higher rated center, they're more likely to stay. If it's in a poverty rate, so a lower SES center has more turnover than a higher SES center.
So, okay, just a quick setup, for the zip code poverty rate, okay, that's a little more complicated, and we're still at, what that could indicate is that you're working in a center with a higher poverty rate, maybe there's less opportunity area, which move on to another. So that could be a reason.
That there's less turnover?
Less
So the,
turnover.
so the higher the poverty rate, the less
So
turnover.
less turnover. So, but I think that's very nuanced and complicated and something we're gonna have to look into further, but that is something that's very interesting.
And so the more without a degree, the less the turnover.
The more without a degree, the higher.
The higher the turnover, okay.
So teachers,
The benchmark should be 1 on that audit.
Okay.
So if it was the same, it would be 1. Above 1, it's 4, below 1.
I have a question. I think one of the big issues we have with our teachers, not just the pay, but the benefits. Did all of these centers not have benefits, or did some of these centers offer benefits and some didn't, or?
Okay, so most offered benefits, some do not. However, that when we ran those numbers, there was no.
Really?
Right. Yeah, so it didn't appear that the amount of benefits offered did much when we looked at them.
But did you know if it was offered versus they took the benefits too?
So that was another complicated part of the data collection process. So some centers reported that teachers did, some reported just that they offered benefits. So again, that's one of those things where we're not sure.
And all of this data is a group of accepted jobs, started with. The question about benefits may also be a big factor in finding the jobs, accepting the job. But the question then from what we have been able to look at, once they started working, it did not appear to be a significant factor.
But depending on what they make an hour, they may qualify for public benefits, which will versus accepting a benefit from an employer, which would cost you more too.
Right, and we know with this grant program in the early days, and certainly throughout though, we definitely heard a lot at the beginning about concern about the benefits. And we definitely had some individual teachers who worked at centers that were part of one of our treatment, where the center received that grant and was ready to pay that teacher additional money, and the teacher said, no, thank you, on it.
And my center was one of those,
But-
if I
but-
can
but
add at
what's-
this point. My center was actually one of those. I had the opportunity to participate in one side with the 10% and with the other one where we didn't get a stipend at all. And you have to keep in mind that during this time, this was post-COVID when they did this study. I would really love to see it again in the next few years since COVID is far gone, but we were competing with DoorDash. We were competing with Uber Eats. We were competing with Chick-fil-A and Walmart and people who were offering more. Even though people were happy where they were, they had an opportunity to possibly stay home with their kids because they were afraid of COVID still. And so you saw a lot of these statistics is really because of that, especially in the rural areas. When they stayed, they didn't have probably many opportunities for Chick-fil-A's and Walmarts and things like that. So I think it was a great study overall, but I think we need to try it again a little bit down the line since COVID has gone away, because I think the data could be a bit skewed because of that. And then to Libby's point and to yours, a lot of the staff declined because some of them had Medicaid, some of them had food stamps, and they didn't want that dollar or 10% or whatever it was going to be to affect those benefits. So, and we do offer benefits. I would say 50% of our staff accept the benefits. So they were comfortable and they just really didn't want to change anything or mess anything up for them.
My question is, what's the definition of benefits? There's so many types of benefits.
Well,
because it's not just medical.
Right.
Do you offer?
We offer everything. We offer
Vacation,
dental,
you offer
401, we have a
short-term
401k
disability.
plan, we have a retirement plan. I invest in that retirement plan. Some of my teachers are well over $15 an hour because they've been with me for 15, 20 years. So I was probably on the lower line of that study with the $8, $9, $10 an hour because I have longevity in staff. My center, where we didn't get any of the extra benefits, I didn't lose anybody during that time except for one to death, COVID. So, like I told Ms. Barber, it all depends on demographics. I think this was post-COVID, too close to COVID. So I think we need to do it over and see if it can really benefit.
And I can say, I have 3 childcare center, and I was a part of the study, and one had the 10%, one had the dollar, one didn't have anything. So all 3 centers, but we was paying, at that time, we was paying $17 an hour. So our staff was making $17 an hour. So with that extra money, not one of my staff said, I don't want the dollar, I don't want the 10%. Not one person said that. My biggest issue in 26 years of working in early childhood, where I see the difference, because I don't have a turnover rate, it's probably as low as 1%. The biggest issue that I saw that what helps us not have a turnover rate is being able to prioritize our teachers to have free childcare. And because we are a part of CityC's Early Head Start and the ECEL program, it prioritizes our teachers to have free childcare. And that's a big amount of money. If teachers can have free childcare, then they will be more happy working at the childcare center, because then they could come to work the same time with their children. They could get off at the same time. And when we put that in place, we notice our turnover rate is not as bad, or really don't have no turnover rate, but maybe 1% overall, and we have 51 teachers.
And so that was going to be my question about demographics, is because you're seeing folks in the early years with the almost vertical turnover rate. You have young people who come in their late teens, early 20s, who then go off and have children. So they're leaving to have children, and then they come back when they need the child care center, and then have both an incentive and the opportunity to stay longer term. And so you might see that it doesn't make any difference early on because they're leaving, not because of money, but because of family decisions or whatever. But when they're older, or they have more longevity, or they're bringing their kids back to the center, that it would actually make a difference. So you would find that incentivizing pay either later, or incentivizing pay as a means of subsidizing the child care, there might be a demographic break there based on age or life experience versus just sort of an average over time.
And also, most of the parents that we have, like I just had a mother who's 23. She had a baby, but she didn't know she was having twins. She was pregnant with twins. She worked up to 8 months. She didn't leave to go home. She had to work to 8 months while she was at the center. Once she had a baby, her and those babies is back at work at least 60 days later. So she didn't have that privilege to stay at home. She had to work up to 8 months, so she couldn't work anymore. She tried to work up to the week before, but the doctor put her on leave. So a lot of our parents don't have those privileges to stay at home. They have to work up to that. But that missing childcare is a big part in it too. And a lot of teachers, I work with a lot of childcare, and the biggest thing is I don't have anywhere for my child to go. And that's where the turnover rate happen. And it's not just in childcare, it's in the hotel industry, and it's in all kind of other business because of lack of childcare.
And anecdotally, I spoke to over 100 childcare centers, and this is the story. Another part of this project is this is full-time. Part-time, the main job below full-time hours, they did not get comps. Right? So there are some gaps in the data as well, where dropping below 30 hours, and then above, we kind of say it's in and out, and people on leave, medical issues. It's not that they actually turn over, that they're on leave in a sense. So that's another nuance to this. But again, overall, when we're looking at 7,500 plus people, this is kind of the patterns that we see. When we get to the specific center level, that's when we're seeing really some very specific needs, right? That should be addressed. But we can continue and just finish up with the discussion of the results. This is kind of what I mentioned already. This is the big thing: is compensation doesn't matter. Okay, we have those 3 different groups. We're not seeing statistical significance, but pay is always statistically significant overall. And this is systemic. systemic pay. So, you know, I suppose when a person is offered an incentive for a limited amount of time, they think about it differently, and they have different behavioral responses to that versus you're getting paid this amount indefinitely. And this is the indefinite, right? The systemic pay compensation matters. We find that with every dollar increase systemically, 70% decrease in turnover. That's the prediction, all else being equal. Next. Okay, next, education matters. Okay, and this is very, very apparent data. Centers that have teachers that are more educated, whether it's CDA and associates, bachelor's or higher, have a much lower turnover rate. We're looking at 57% more likely over a center that has less teachers with them having. Okay, and then center performance, we received this from LPO's public data. This is scores that centers achieve, performance scores. This is the 2022-23 performance scores in line with our study. And centers with a higher performance score have less turnover. That seems kind of right with your center performing well, culture is good, look at jobs, administratively things are going pretty well. Your students are doing well. This all incentive to stay. You have a purpose.
Did you see a correlation between center performance, pay, and education, so that better performing centers paid better and had better education, or not?
So there's statistical study combine all this. So this is all else equal. If we assume, if we take into account the education of teachers and not the pay, all else equal, center performance matters. So in a sense, I would say that is correct. That altogether, the probably highest, the lowest turnover rates are probably with really good education, with really high pay, and again, that's included. But overall, again, yes. So center performance did significantly correlate with lower. So something else to look at. What that means is not my expertise. So how that's measured, I'm not exactly sure, but figuring out ways to improve center performance in the metrics that the LA uses would be another consideration when we're trying to.
The question over. Did you control for the number of publicly funded children in your center?
So we did have that data with that.
The reason why I ask, center performance definitely matters in terms of the funding you're able to get from the CCAP bonus.
Type 3 centers?
Exactly. That's the ones who are receiving the bonus.
Yes.
So if you're a 5-star center, you're getting $1,500 per publicly funded child. If you're a 2-star center, you're getting $0 per publicly funded child. That's a pretty big amount of money that I could see potentially paying for a lot of these things. I was just wondering if there had been that control.
Yeah, so, yeah, well, I can't speak directly to that. I know across the board, this is type 3, so that should be.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we can go back.
Yeah.
Definitely something further to look, but I believe we do have.
I think that would be super interesting to see because like it is a really good question, right? Like, is it the quality or is it the things that are leading to the quality, right?
Well, and again.
And there's the relationship where they're mutually reinforcing, of course. But I'm wondering, of course, infant toddler tool is going to merge eventually. We're going to see center performance scores go down. Does that decrease in access to, CCAP funding through the bonus there? Does that change anything because of this? Or is it because it's really the same quality? We're just changing the scale, which would lead to a change in payment. So I'm just trying to think through all those things in terms of teacher retention and stuff like that.
But I know in my years of being in business with the child care assistance bonus, when I first started, I used to get about 85% in child care assistance.
Oh, wow.
Now my child care assistance is like 2 or 3%. So a lot of people who used to get these big bonuses, even though you're high quality centers, you're not getting a large amount because you don't have a lot of child care assistance kids because we got 35,000 on the waiting list and we don't have enough spread across through the different parishes to have enough in your center to be able to have the extra money to pay for staff.
Yeah, I would just be very curious because that can be a big financial.
Thank you. Yeah, this is, and so these final 2 slides I think this is kind of what we're talking about is, again, compensation matters, education matters, and performance score matters within this study. But we don't see significant difference between adding $1 an hour or adding that too much to that baseline group. And that's something that needs to, we're still working on, trying to figure out and trying to really explain. And we do have a few ideas of what that could be. And one is that, again, it's systemic pay versus just a brief bump and how people think about this. Behavioral economics, right? People think it's going to end in 2 years, they might have to. We could see centers acting differently because they know down the road there's a group receiving 10%, maybe they get their a little bit of a raise because they don't want to lose them forward. These types of things we're trying to figure out and use as much of the data we have to explain something that's not quite invisible that we would expect an extra hour to really be.
But what about the behavioral economics piece around high stress jobs and the level of compensation increase rates, and like, what does that matter?
I really appreciate that question. So the idea is that in higher stress jobs, or something like, hey, to really make a dent in how people change their attitude toward their job or whether they stay or leave, you really need a much higher. Like if we're looking at most people in this study are making about $20,000 a year. Okay, $20,000 to $22,000 is not really going to make too much of a difference staying or leaving, especially, again, we were talking about income plus support, SNAP, WIC, Medicaid, that's actually 2,000 over 10. And you might be worse off making, $2,000 extra a year.
Have you also looked at the turnover rate, the average turnover rate for similarly situated individuals at similar pay bands? So do you see turnovers at, Starbucks, at, bagging groceries at the grocery store, people making similar dollar amounts at entry-level jobs? And is it a natural consequence of, I started in this job because it was the only job I had, and then I went and I got a job at Amazon, or I got a job at Walmart or something like that. And so you see that churn at the entry level, at that pay band anyway. And so again, maybe a targeted subsidy for folks who are coming back from having children or who are on that 3 or 4 year cliff between the difference between making it a living or making it a career. And does that give you some insight into, again, sort of disaggregating some of that along those lines? But at least you'd be able to say the turnover rate for this kind of banding is 46%. So we should expect to see 46% for childcare centers because it's people in a similar demographic dynamic.
Yep. Yeah, I think that is something to consider. I would say, I'm not an expert exactly in this field. I haven't looked into that, but I think it's a great addition to how we view this particular study. But again, we're thinking about stress. So full time, 40 hours a week, taking care of kids. I was calling these people on the phone. I heard the screaming in the background. It's crazy. Y'all know it's a lot. Versus working customer service stuff.
Oh, right.
Right.
There's a lot of screaming there sometimes.
Yeah. It's very
always
nuanced, right? How we're looking at things, how people, there's also this theory that people that work in education, they're passionate about that. They care about it, they care about kids, there's a community aspect to it, you're taking care of children, there's trust in the community, you have status in the community doing these things, and yet you are maintaining less than $30,000 a year, you are asset limited, your savings can be wiped out with one bad accident. So these are the types of things, thinking about the American dream, I mean, you don't have these savings. And when we think about like service jobs, you're starting at $50 an hour, and that is generally something you take as you pursue other things through time. So these are the types of nuances. We'll talk about demographic, how things work. It's hard because this is what we have. We have pay, we have education, taking all these other little nuance things. Are they all people leaving or staying at your center, and why?
Those are the types of things we would love to flex, but it's just so different everywhere.
Yeah.
Shreveport, New Orleans, just different things, rural, urban, you know.
So in Hoyles, we were one of the centers that just had the flat pay.
Yeah.
And an unexpected, like never in a million years, did I think that this was going to happen. I was very excited to give this, for some of these teachers, life-changing money to them. You know, $143 is a lot for a family who's struggling. But our call-in rate skyrocketed because they had a little bit of cushion. So an unexpected, like we didn't expect it, but they were like, oh, okay. So I have, in my mind, I was like, sweet. And I would tell all of our teachers, like, save this money, use it as like a savings account. This is extra money to you. You don't waste it. You know, No, our call-in rate skyrocketed, and trying to change that mindset.
Yeah.
Was
They were going to
something we just didn't expect.
Yeah.
And then as a center, you know, we had to give it to the teachers regardless of call-ins or performance or all the other things that come, you know, in a center. So that then created some internal issues, but just an unexpected response was the increase in call-in rates.
What I find too with this study, you said something about demographics. I think if you go back to what I saw with a lot of centers that I was in contact with that also had this, the newer generation they don't really care much about the dollar amount. They're more concerned about work-life balance.
Yeah.
So when she said that they had that extra to call out, they did that. So I think that study, if we do this again and we see what age groups, did this, you would probably find that your most turnover was in the, what's this generation called? I can't remember. In this one. Because they really are more concerned with work-life balance. So, and even if you would compare that to Starbucks and everywhere else, I think it is the same there. So.
PJs, I see a new person every day I go to PJ. See the same person. I go for
Mentioned in your calls, we talked to a lot of these centers. Is there an ethnographic or a qualitative component to this that you have for context? I mean, these folks are bringing up some great contextual elements that might help color the data in important ways. And if you talk to 100 centers, probably pretty good for an ethnographic sampling.
Well, I'll say, I'm jumping in part to sort of emphasize the enormous number of hours that here individually put into the project. We call back every single, not only were we reaching out quarterly to collect this data, but into that, as we start putting that together, we realized there was enough missing pieces or data that did not fit that we needed to talk to every center. So Eric carried a line share that work. Like I said, we had a large upwards 10 kind of help divide that up. And so the focus of that, was cleaning up the data set that was kind of the centerpiece of this analysis. We didn't really have a qualitative element in the research design, which I wish we would have. I think this is a big infusion of dollars into the child care market, and the research piece was kind of a lagging support. So we were hustling to try to make sure we could collect a core group of data, but it wasn't for all the money that went into this program. It wasn't a big research study, I think. So we've got some good data. The other thing I was going to wait and kind of end on this. I think we've got maybe one more slide with a couple of bullets on it. Do you want to just highlight something that exists today that did not exist 2 years ago? The legislature has created a new state longitudinal data system. First, ever thinking of this, and the Pico centers separate from this work. You've been designated as the administrator. So that is now a resource that we're thinking about turning to come back with a little bit of a different set of data and explore some of these questions. Can we get some more demographics? We can actually get information about some people might have been on. And most importantly, people leave that center, we might be able to see
where they go.
So we've got data from Workforce Commission on wage records across the economy. We've got education-related data, so we can see what training programs we went through and all of that. Medicaid enrollment and SNAP enrollment, and so I think that may be another rich resource we want to turn to, kind of revisit some of the same questions, to be able to get to some of the great feedback we got to today that can't necessarily answer with this data set. But we're not.
I guess one interesting thought that I just had listening to it. So for most of the things, I think the conclusion sort of follows from the data you said, but from the education level, I think it's interesting. So in theory, what seems to be implied is better education level leads to higher stability. Seems to be the conclusion. But practically speaking, better education level means you can then enter into a new bracket of getting additional jobs. So if you have experience at an early childhood center and you got a bachelor's degree, now you can qualify to go work at the K-12 system, which is going to pay you $20,000 a year more, which is going to lead to higher turnover. So it just strikes me that that's an interesting caveat that I don't think naturally follows from the data, but is worth, I don't know that it necessarily needs to be here, but it strikes me as a footnote that wouldn't otherwise flow or be acknowledged.
So the degree, it was percentage of teachers without a degree, so we didn't necessarily.
The other way.
And I think I imagine from what I've seen, it's mostly TAs.
Yeah.
Right, so people with TAs, and I also know that usually, and I think the center directors, you get $1 bump, right?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Some,
My teachers get $4 more when they get their CD.
Yeah.
yeah, so it's depending on the center, but generally that comes to take on.
But we have teachers that have CDAs, associates, bachelor's degree, and I have two teachers working on master's degrees. So, yeah, and they don't want to leave.
And that's something we want to.
Okay.
Ask why, what drives them, why they're so passionate about it. They want to get a master's degree, even, though it sounds like you pay your teachers very, very high.
Yeah, they do get paid a whole lot more money.
Have you considered in New Orleans, we give a bonus to teachers if they work 30 hours per week for 3 months consistently? And there's a lot of data around how many teachers get that. It went from $750 to $1,000. So literally every 90 days, they get an additional, if they do follow that, $4,000 a year.
And some still don't get it.
But they only have to work a minimum of 30 hours per week consistently for the 3 months every month. If they miss 1 month, they don't get it. But that's a program. Wage enhancement bonus.
Yeah. But it really impact. I saw teachers of mine purchase cars, put down payments on cars, and pay for the insurance for their cars. So different things because they're getting this large amount of money at one time instead of small amount of increments of money every pay period.
So I just want to note that these gentlemen have graciously agreed to come back to the advisory council meeting in September. So it would be a lot of the same information, but there might be a few updates, and it would be a chance. If you have other thoughts, other questions, you are welcome to come back to the advisory council meeting and hear about it and have more of this really great discussion then as well. But thank you very much.
I'd like to give them a hand. This is exactly what the legislature wants every time they're making, particularly financial ones. What's the data? And they don't want to hear what the data is in Mississippi or Alabama. They want to know what it is in Louisiana. And what Dr. Barnes and his group are now doing is collecting the kind of data we need to make a case for the dollars that we need. So we deeply appreciate the work you're doing. This has been an exciting day. I would ask now for any public comment. Anyone who came to the meeting that would like to make any public comment? A couple of folks over there. Seeing none, I just want to thank all of you. Some of you drove 4 hours, 5 hours to be here. That is a commitment to the kids of this state, to the children of this state who need you the most. And this was an exciting discussion today. Robust ideas were presented that I know are going to help the department. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here, because we can get this done in my lifetime, I hope. And we're going to work very hard to do it. So if there's no further business, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn. We're gonna be sending out, from the department, the,
Libby.
dates this year. Do we know what the date?
You're good.
There won't be another meeting, but we will share the report.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Travis.
Thank you.
The traffic.
Yeah, I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
How you feeling?
Yeah.
Safe walk back to the place.
Hey, lady. How you doing?
It's like.
All right, great. Thank